Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Twisted Outreach Project Back Here in Scoliosis First Fusion Forum. I'm Martha Carter, and I am the director of TOPS, as we call it. And since 2010, we have been running a resource-filled website with the idea to connect people with scoliosis and fusion to specialists, to bodywork practitioners, to teachers, educators, and generally help people learn more about scoliosis and fusion so they can help themselves. We run workshops, classes, retreats. In fact, I'm going to be running a fusion retreat here in my yurt on Vancouver Island, along with some of the other people on this call in May. And so you should join our mailing list on our website at www.twistedoutreachproject.com. And with that, you will receive a monthly newsletter to stay in the loop about all things TOPS and about all our events with fusion and scoliosis. So the idea today of holding this first fusion forum is to share stories and learn from each other ways to maybe find more ease in living with this difficult condition. My story is that I actually was diagnosed at around age 11, 12. I was an aspiring dancer, and they took the wait and see approach. And at age 14, I was required to have the full Harrington rod procedure with a fusion from T6 to L3. I had to lie in bed in a plaster body cast for the better part of a year, going through various procedures, including traction, striker frame, and other things that maybe aren't as common today. But basically, I came out of that being told that I was never allowed to dance again, which I really didn't want to believe, right? At 14, you want to just kind of keep on going and live your life. But I quickly learned that, in fact, it was quite difficult to dance. I did end up being a choreographer and director and worked with a lot of really able-bodied people, which made me really understand how limiting living with a fusion can be and how it is a disability that we live with for our whole life. And who do we talk to about it, right? So that is the reason that I want to hold these forums. And in fact, for the last few years, in collaboration with the Sam Kaya Back Care studio in New York City, we have been holding fusion support groups every month online. People come together and just share their stories. And we don't record those. We just listen to each other and we support each other. And they've been so enlightening for me. And I think a lot of people, one of the first things they say in these fusion support groups is they just feel alone. They don't know who to go to. They don't know who to talk to. They don't know where to get help. And so we're able to support each other just by sharing what we've discovered for ourselves that can maybe find some more ease in our back, or maybe the different techniques that we can use for movement to help us stay strong, that sort of thing. But because we don't record those support groups, it seemed important to perhaps hold an event that we could record and put on YouTube so that this information can be shared more widely with the general public, and perhaps kind of spread the word about how there are solutions to help ourselves feel a little more comfortable with this situation that we all are in. And most importantly, to realize that we're not alone, right? There's a lot of us out there. In fact, you know, I did some quick math and I realized that the surgery was started in the 1960s, and probably it took a while for it to build up, but maybe there's around 150,000 of these surgeries done a year around the world, maybe more. It's hard to know. There's hardly any information online about these statistics. So I'm guessing that if I just do some quick math, since around 1965, 150,000 a year, maybe around 9 million of us walking around as the first cohort in the history of humanity with rods, hooks, and a fused spine. And yet, where do we go for help? One day we wake up and we want to find our surgeon and find our records and find out what was done to us, because of course as teenagers we're quite resilient. We don't necessarily notice what we're going through right away, but almost always there's an issue as we get older. And when we go and try to find that help, often the surgeon's gone, maybe retired, maybe the whole medical clinic's not even there anymore. Maybe the records aren't there. I mean, of course, now maybe records are held more consistently than they were back in the 70s, but I couldn't find my records when I went back to look. And so, that makes it very tricky to know what to do for ourselves. And think about it. Somebody who had the surgery in 1965, maybe they were 14, they would be 73 today. And they have had those rods, hooks, and fusion for 59 years. And that is bound to cause some issues. And for sure, aging is not easy for anybody, but aging with this condition is particularly challenging and can be also very, very very difficult. We know that there's many struggles we go through, everything from pain and stiffness and discomfort in general, but also things like, body image issues, or for those of us who had it very young, there's a sense of it being done to us. We didn't have much say over it. So we can develop anxiety, depression, body fears. There's also the idea that there's social issues and work issues. Like, how do you even talk about it? How do you explain it to somebody what you're going through? And maybe at work you have trouble standing for a long time or sitting for a long time. Or what about sleeping issues where it causes you to not be able to sleep comfortably? And then where do you go to find help with these issues? What about nerve issues, the need for revision surgery, the fact that we might have adjacent disc syndrome, the idea that the discs on either side of the fusion start to disintegrate, or as we get older, we face other issues like osteoporosis along with the spinal fusion. Once again, very, very difficult to find people who actually really have experience and knowledge around how to help people age safely and move safely with spinal fusion and scoliosis. So here we are today to share some stories. Today we have 3 speakers who are each going to share their story of how they have found ways to help themselves. And also, more importantly, I think that having these discussions help us realize that we're really not alone, right? So without further ado, I will introduce you to our first speaker today, Stacy Joyce. She's on the TOPS team. She's a teacher of Pilates and scoliosis for people with scoliosis and fusion, but I'm going to let her tell you her story herself. Enjoy.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for letting me share my little sliver of my life. So we all have so many stories to tell. It's hard to know where to start. But again, my name is Stacy Joyce. I live in the Charlotte metro area with my husband and 11-year-old son. I'm 46 years old, and I had my fusion in 1994. So that marks 30 years ago this fall. And like many, I had the mild childhood scoliosis that never seemed like a big deal. Just forgot about it, didn't do anything. And then lo and behold, when I was a teenager, I was shopping with my mom as a freshman in high school for a bathing suit. And you try in a bathing suit, you're going to see your body. And I didn't know why my left back was protruding, and scoliosis didn't come to mind. And I thought for sure I had a tumor. Why else would I have this mass coming out of my body? So we went to the doctor, ended up with an orthopedic surgeon. And I think from the get-go, the assumption was that I was a candidate for surgery. But the surgeon wanted to wait until I grew more, so he did not operate right away. So it was a little bit wait and see, but it was, I was only getting worse. And when I first saw the doctor, I was not in pain. By the time I had my spinal fusion when I was 16, I was pretty much in constant pain. My shoulders were so uneven. Anybody could spot that I had scoliosis. And I had no idea that there was anything to do for pain except for take pain medicine, which I wasn't allowed to take. So I look back at like pictures at that age and I can just see it in my face. I was just unhappy and I was in pain. So when I was 16, I was, going to have this surgery. And even though I knew this for a while, I never told my friends. I was just in denial about it. I do have a twin sister. She's fraternal. She does not have scoliosis. And she's the one that ended up telling my friends Because I think one day I was just going to slip into the hospital and not tell anyone if it were up to me. I didn't know anything about the details. I was so unprepared. I just showed up and like did what I was told, and I didn't want any more information. I do remember being told that there was a risk of paralysis. And in my mind, I just thought to myself, well, I'm not going to live that way. And if that happens to me, then I'm going to end my life. And, I've held on to that since talking with people in Martha's group. And, it's not so uncommon, to have these thoughts when you're a teenager and you're just, you're not thinking straight and you really don't know the chances of something like that happening in the first place. So in 1994 is when I had my surgery, and I was fused from T5 to L3. At the time, my major curve was almost 80 degrees. My secondary curve was 60 degrees. And I had Harrington rods, I had screws in my back, and I was in the hospital for 3 weeks. I had the anterior surgery, a week later, the posterior surgery. They removed a rib to use for the bone graft. And I was so out of touch with what to expect. I thought I was going to be walking around the hospital and painting in the break room while I was there. But lo and behold, I was staring at the ceiling, pressing my morphine button. Like I didn't want to do anything at all. So when I got to the point where I could sit up in the hospital, that was the first time I had a brace. So I never had a brace prior, but I did have a brace, a hard brace that I wore for about 6 months after my fusion. And it had a chest plate, and it had a plate at the pubis, and it strapped around the back. And really it prevented me from flexion, extension, twisting. So my spine was just staying straight while it fused. And I remember really trying to hide that. I was wearing like really baggy clothes over it. And I see young children nowadays with these hard braces that are all decorated and colored, and they wear it proudly on top of their clothing. And I'm just in awe. I'm like, wow, they're so brave. So when I got out of the hospital, at no point, like nobody ever talked about like, how do you feel, or body image, or just like how to talk to your friends about it. None of that. And I think I just pretty much like stayed in denial about it. And my surgery was at the end of October, and I stayed home from school for the end of the school year. And I was going to go back in January. So New Year's Eve, I wanted to go out with my friends, and my parents didn't want me to. And I begged and I begged, and they let me go out. So I just want to go out and like do what my friends are doing and be like any other rebellious teen. And so we went to some club and, drinking and whatever. And I ended up collapsing in the bathroom at this club just months after my surgery with my brace. And my friends had to call my parents, and I was taken in the ambulance to the hospital for alcohol poisoning. And it was the same hospital that I had my fusion at. And I remember none of it. I don't remember a single minute. I just woke up in the hospital, and they said, you have to stay awake. You have to sit up. We're calling your parents to pick you up. And still, like, nobody talked to me. Like, why did this happen? It was obvious. Like I was totally separated from my body. I didn't care about my health. I didn't care about healing my body. I just thought that I could ignore it. And so I seriously come full circle. So I don't want to be doom and gloom. So about 2 years later, it was really a long time before my surgeon was like, okay, you have full clearance, you can do whatever. It was when I went to college, and I was so nervous to do anything. I was living near the beach. I was even afraid to like step foot in the ocean because I thought I might get knocked down. But around that time, I took my first yoga class, and I just felt safe. And I think it really united me with my body to like do something physical that felt safe, that wasn't like big or jarring or needing coordination. And I also think now it probably helped me with like anxiety and just dealing with like so many like bottled up emotions. So I stuck with yoga, And I think for 10 years after my fusion, I was pretty much like pain-free. I went to college, I studied abroad, I lived with host families in different countries. I lived on a ship for 3 months. I was in the Peace Corps in Central America for 2 years. So I did like whatever it is that I wanted to do. I don't feel like my back stopped me. And in 2005, I moved to New York City. And that's when I started working office jobs. And I'm sure some of you guys are like, oh gosh, we know what happens then. Then it's like, that's when the back pain started happening. And it started with like an occasional, okay, this like shoulder tightness for a couple weeks, but it just got to the point where it was constant and I was miserable. And I was spending my entire weekend trying to undo all this pain that I was in during the week. And I was still, practicing yoga and trying to take care of myself, but I just couldn't undo sitting for that long. And so I came to a point where I just physically felt like I can't do this anymore. It was really making me depressed. And so I decided to take yoga teacher training, and I completed an intensive 1 month, 200-hour, didn't learn anything about yoga for people with scoliosis or spinal fusion. And I jumped into the 300-hour training. And in that training, I decided to do a project for my fellow trainees about practicing yoga when you have scoliosis. I didn't even think about the spinal fusion. And this was around 2011. And I just couldn't find very much information online. But I was living in New York City, and I knew that there were specialized teachers and studios that I never sought out because they just weren't convenient. So what you don't know, you just don't know. But the first teacher I met, Mimi Rossetti, she had scoliosis, a fusion, and she happened to be pregnant at the time. So it was like triple whammy, but it was very inspiring to meet somebody, because I'd never met at that point anybody that had a fusion as well, and who also did yoga. And I went to my very first yoga for spinal fusion class with her, and it was a roller coaster. So on one hand, it's like, here I am in a room with people with a back like me, and I'm like, wow, is this what my back looks like? Or, oh, is this like how I'm going to be moving, one day? Because we don't know what our backs look like. And then on the other hand, I saw the instruction and I was like, holy moly, this is so different from what I'm investing so much time and money in. And it was also very upsetting that I've been practicing for about 15 years, was living in New York City, going to all these, studios with good teachers. Nobody knew about scoliosis and spinal fusion. And when I left that class, I just bawled my eyes out the whole way subway ride home, because I just felt like I can't be a teacher. I'm doing so many things wrong. And my partner said, don't go back, because I was so upset. And I knew that like I had to go back. And I got to the point where I felt like even if I spent all that money and those 500 hours, I'm like, to go through that process, that path to get to the point to learn how to finally take care of my back and take care of my fusion was so well worth the path. Like, we never really know where we're going to go. And so I just became inspired to learn more. I started working that year, 2011, taking workshops and classes with Deborah Wolk about yoga for scoliosis. And I still practice with her almost like every single week. And she's been very inspirational. And I had the next year 2012, when I was pregnant, I was just very set that like I wanted a natural birth, because I felt confident in my body. I felt like I really understood it. And at the time I was living in New Jersey, and New Jersey had the highest rate of cesarean sections. So an epidural is an intervention, and it can be a domino effect with those like interventions. So in my mind, I thought, I've gone through some major back surgeries and lots of pain. There's no way that the pain from pregnancy and delivery is going to be like 3 weeks. So I just felt like I've got it. I can handle it. And in Deborah and Mimi, like they're both very like inspiring and encouraging. Like, you can do it. I worked with hypnobirthing doula, and I would like meditate on it. It was like so much in my mindset, but I had a great pregnancy. I taught yoga throughout it. I walked all the time. I did my meditations, and I had a natural birth for my son the next year. And I felt like, okay, you're good, Stacy. Don't get ahead of yourself. So I only have one. And I'm happy with that. And I think more in having like a little one and having another one on your hip, I think it would have been too much for me. I felt like one child felt appropriate. So in 2019, I started working with Elise Browning Miller, and I did her certification program, yoga for scoliosis. So it just took me time to feel confident in teaching, not just for back conditions, but to really teach for scoliosis, because it's complicated. And when you work with really great teachers, you're like, I set the bar really high for like what I needed to know. But Elise was great, and she was very encouraging, like, yeah, you should be working with people who have fusions too. And in 2020, with like the lockdowns, and all of a sudden I was homeschooling and sitting, I had, since my fusion, like 3 episodes of like the worst back pain that I've had, well, since my surgery. And it was scary because it happened 3 times in 6 months. I couldn't really move. I couldn't take care of myself. I couldn't even think of being a passenger in a car. And what really I learned from that was like the impact that stress has on your pain response, because we didn't know what was happening in the world. All of a sudden I was sitting all the time, had a young kid, trying to be a cheerleader for them or for him. And at the end of the day, it's like I wasn't taking care of myself. So I still practiced my yoga and like the breathing and meditation and relaxation, even though I couldn't do anything physical. So that's, our yoga can be like helpful in so many different ways through the phases of our life. And that was a real learning lesson for me. And also, through Martha Carter's fusion support group, I found a lot of relief after going to those, and like, gosh, these things I was like scared to say, or feelings, other people like are like, oh, I totally get you. And you're like, oh, I don't feel so abnormal, or it's not so dark. Like we all kind of have like these same feelings. And now I feel like I've really come full circle. I teach yoga for people with, I teach yoga for back care. I teach yoga for people with scoliosis, for spinal fusions. And next year I'll finish my training for scoliopilates. I found that very helpful for more like core strength and helping with like low back pain. And I really prioritize my health now, whether it's like sleeping or hydration, stress management. I can tell when I need to go to a yoga class. It's not because I feel tight sometimes. It's like I can mentally, like I can tell. And I just really appreciate having a more holistic approach, and not just thinking that it's pain meds that can bring you relief. And if I could just leave like some parting advice, it's that you can't ignore your body all week and make up for it on the weekends. And because I've tried that, it didn't work. And then the other is, really to start taking care of your physical and mental health now, and not when it's gone. And it's work every day. We all know that. But at a certain point, you have to maintain yourself anyway. So just do a really good job at it. And then lastly, like my kind of motto that I have for my business is the 3 S's I like to share. It's to stand tall, and stand proud, and stand together. And that's all I have to share.
And this is how we applaud on Zoom.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that, Stacy. Yeah. Always a good reminder that sometimes things feel better and then they get worse, but we can always come back and feel better again.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, if there's any questions for Stacy, hold on to them till the end, or write them in the chat. And thank you so much. And let's now, let me see. I'm going to figure out how to then remove the spotlight, and let's hear from Matt. Hi, Matt. Welcome, Matt Frewen.
Hi, guys. Thank you for having me.
Welcome, and thanks for coming.
So, I mean, I'd love to share my story too. I'm sure there's lots of overlap and lots of things that we've all sort of experienced. But I think it's good, even if there is some overlap, to just reinforce some of that stuff. So, I had my fusion in 2008. I was first diagnosed with scoliosis in around 2006. Um, I didn't know what scoliosis was. I know a lot of people get caught with or at least diagnosed with scoliosis through the Adams test. So if anyone's not familiar, which I'm sure a lot of people are, essentially your school nurse will have like almost like it's a photo day where it'll be the Adams test day, and every single classroom will go over to the school nurse. You'll essentially take off your shirt, bend down, and try and touch your toes. And it's an easy way to sort of check the spine and see if there's any curvature there. I never had an Adams test. Luckily, my dad was a pediatrician. So when I was 16 years old, 2006, I was working out with my dad actually, and being, a young boy, essentially we were working out without a shirt on, and he sort of noticed that my scapular were kind of poking out, like winging. And it's something I never noticed, but he sort of was a little startled and shocked. Asked me to sort of bend down and touch my toes, which I didn't know at the time, but he was essentially doing the Adams test on me. And he must have noticed a small curvature and then my shoulder blades winging out. He looked a little concerned, which kind of shocked me at first, but he said, "Hey, listen, we're going to have to go and get an x-ray for you." So in the next few weeks, I had an x-ray done, and lo and behold, I was diagnosed with scoliosis. I had the initial curvature. I did have a double S curve. The larger curve was, I believe it was 38 degrees when it was first measured. And then there was, which I'm sure we're all familiar with, which is sort of the wait and see approach. It wasn't suggested that I have a brace because I looked pretty straight, other than a small imbalance on my shoulders. And my scapular sort of winging out. I didn't have a huge sort of side hump or side bend or anything. So essentially, I was just told, "Hey, wait and see. If this progresses, then we'll address it as it progresses." So it was first measured at 38 degrees in 2006, and then 6 months later had a follow-up X-ray at 42 degrees, another 6 months at 48 degrees. And then the conversation of surgeries came up when it was diagnosed at about 48 degrees, which after 45 degrees, it's pretty difficult to manage it in a brace. And so they do recommend surgery. I was almost turning 18, and because my dad had some references to the pediatric system, and in Canada, the pediatric system and the adult system are quite different. There are different hospitals for children, pediatric systems and adult systems. And it was suggested to me that I get the surgery before I turned 18, just so that I could be I could have the surgery in that pediatric system, and then I wouldn't have to go into an adult wait list. They said maybe when I turned 25 or 26 that I'd be a little bit more involved in a stage of life, and then having that surgery because of the recovery period would sort of take me out of a more of adult role in my life. Whereas when I was 17, just meant missing school for a month or so. So I had the surgery booked at 48 degrees, and then about 6 months later, in it was December of 2007, actually, I went underwent the surgery for the fusion. I was fused from T3 to L1. When it was finally sort of measured at the final X-ray before the surgery, it was 52 degrees, so it was progressing quite rapidly every 6 months. Had the surgery, didn't really know what I was getting myself into. I was told it was going to be about a 2-week hospital stay. And then after the 2-week hospital stay, that I'd be going to half days for at least a couple of months. But then I would probably be able to return to a pretty normal life. So I sort of told my friends about this. I said, "Hey, listen, I'm going to be missing school. I'm going to be sort of missing the Christmas period and things like that. I'm having this surgery." And I think a lot of friends of mine thought I was being dramatic for whatever reason. They didn't really understand. I had kind of tried to show them the X-ray, and they said, "Wow, like that looks really curved." But I don't think even myself, I don't think they understood sort of the severity of the surgery. I had a friend of mine. I had the surgery booked for a Tuesday. And he said, "Hey, do you want to come see a movie on Thursday this week?" And I said, "Oh, well, I'm having that surgery on Tuesday." And he said, "Yeah, but you should be out and good by Thursday, right?" And so it was just sort of this naivety that I had, and I think everyone else had. While I was in the hospital, my friends thought to be kind, they'd bring me a thermos full of maple bacon. as a sort of like treat while I'm staying in the hospital. And about 6 of my friends showed up to the hospital and were absolutely shocked to see tubes going through me. And just lots of systems hooked up to me and things like that. So I went through the surgery. Took me, I had a 10-day, I believe, hospital stay. I might have been shorter than that. I was on bed rest for probably about 6 weeks until around January. And then I went back to half days at school, in high school at the time, just sort of finishing things up. But things did kind of go back to normal, so to speak. I didn't have pain before the surgery. And immediately after the surgery, other than a lot of fatigue, I wasn't experiencing any like sort of acute pain or anything like that. But I had 3 physiotherapy sessions. That was sort of the approach at the time, was to just have an outpatient physiotherapy program, and they had three physiotherapy sessions booked for me. The physiotherapist that I actually was put with had never seen a patient with scoliosis, wasn't even familiar what scoliosis was. And after sort of the initial diagnosis day, admitted to me that she's going to have to do some research for the next week to try and learn about this. I had 2 follow-up sessions after that, which were pretty general, just sort of ride on a bike a little bit, get sort of warmed up, and then just try and do some general sort of stretching. But it was a very brief sort of physiotherapy sort of education protocol, you could say. I remember my friends were asking me about it, and they were sort of laughing at some of the exercises, just these sort of simple sort of move your arms up and down or move one shoulder like this or that. And I was teased a little bit for that, just because they thought it was kind of silly. It was pretty hard to see that I had scoliosis. When I had a shirt on, I looked like I was standing straight, other than a very small shoulder imbalance that I still had after the surgery. It was pretty much impossible to notice. And the x-rays looked pretty gruesome. A lot of people sort of were almost in disbelief that this hardware was actually inside of me. But a lot of times I was asked, hey, throw off your shirt and let us see your scar, almost as like a parlor trick. But anyway, I carried through life. I was a drummer, actually. I was getting into music really, really heavily in high school. So I was planning on doing an audition to university only about 2 or 3 months after that surgery. I ended up canceling one of my auditions, but I went through with the other 2 auditions that were in April. That following April, I had the surgery in December. And I ended up getting through the auditions, and I got accepted to school, and I sort of carried on with life as per normal. I was working as a sort of cashier, and I went back to working as a cashier. I sort of requested not to work an 8-hour shift, trying keeping it less than that, but I was starting to experience some little bits of sharp pain under my shoulder blades. But I just sort of didn't really know how to address it. It was something where, talking about back pain, especially sort of with the male experience, you're just sort of told to suck it up and move on. So that's what I sort of did. I just sort of thought, hey, I've got this sort of sharp sensation, but it seems like maybe it'll go away. There wasn't anything that the surgeon suggested at sort of the 6-month follow-up. He just said, hey, keep an eye on it, but that's pretty normal. So I got into university, and I was going sort of full-time as a musician in school. Which meant a lot of performance, a lot of playing my instruments, playing drums, playing different keyboard instruments and things like that. Once I got to the end of sort of the 4-year program, the sharpness and the tingling sort of sensations in my shoulder blades were sort of getting progressively worse. But it was difficult because trying to address this from a sort of meaningful standpoint was pretty difficult. I didn't know whether or not I should be seeing my surgeon again, whether or not I should be going to some kind of physiotherapy, which at the time seemed kind of expensive. So I just tried to go to the gym as often as possible. I wasn't lifting heavy weights or anything like that, but I wasn't told when I had the surgery that there were certain things that I should do or shouldn't do. There was very little sort of education on what a lifestyle as an adult would look like having the surgery. So again, I just sort of had to suck it up a little bit. I think people believed me as much as they could, but I think a lot of people have experienced back pain in some degree, and so they just thought, hey, it's something that you experience and maybe it comes and goes. So I kind of just carried on with life. I got through that program, and I moved to Toronto, which was about 2 hours away, and I did a recording program. And when I moved there, it was even more sort of intensive physically, just sort of traveling from from workplace to school. And the pain was sort of, again, just kind of escalating bit by bit by bit. It's sort of that boiled frog sort of thing where as much as it was escalating bit by bit, I just sort of didn't have a benchmark. Is this normal? Is this too much pain? And I think a lot of people who have had a spinal fusion generally have a very high pain threshold. So I just kind of kept pushing through and kept pushing through. Eventually, I sort of brought it up to my parents more often and more often, and I just sort of brought the hammer down and said, "Hey, listen, I need to address this somehow. I don't know what I'm supposed to do, but Dad, you're a pediatrician, you were a doctor. Is there something you can do to help me here?" And so they got me some physiotherapy sessions as a Christmas gift, which was again about 3, maybe 4 sessions worth. And I remember being quite bitter. It was expensive, as I think a lot of people know that physiotherapy sessions can run anywhere between $50 to $150. So 3 sessions was about $200 or $250, and that was my Christmas gift. And I remember being quite bitter that, hey, I'm asking to be relieved from some of this pain, and it's sort of being gifted to me as a Christmas gift. Like, what happens to my other Christmas gift? But anyway, I went to this other physiotherapist in Toronto, and when he went through that first sort of diagnosing session, he said, "Hey, listen, I know we only have 2 or 3 sessions booked, but this is quite a serious sort of endeavor for me to take on, and there's no way I can help you in this short amount of time." So I tried my best to sort of keep up with sessions, but a lot of the time the cost was a huge barrier. And so I just sort of fell off to the wayside again. I went through a couple of physiotherapy sessions, learned some things with lacrosse balls to try and relieve some of that pain. But essentially from then on, I was taking a lacrosse ball and sort of sticking it behind my scapula to try and just rub against it and just try and relieve that pain as much as I could. And again, I just sort of carried on with life. I didn't really know what else to do. I wasn't really told or wasn't really able to sort of develop a sort of physiotherapy regimen that was going to help me. So I just sort of carried on through life in my 20s. When I got to about 26 years old, which is 2006, which would have been about 8 years after that surgery, I got an opportunity to be in a band and to move to the United States and be in a band full time. And even though I was in quite a bit of pain trying to work various office jobs and things like that, I thought maybe this opportunity would actually be more helpful because I would be able to sort of do music full time, and I would just have to focus on getting through rehearsals and a little bit of practice sessions on drums. And I did, but unfortunately, as those opportunities grew and grew, we were playing more shows, there was more traveling, and there was a lot more going on. And so the pain just got steadily worse and worse. Eventually, I did end up going back to my surgeon who gave me the surgery initially. But it was quite odd to do that because this was the pediatric system, the childhood system. And as an adult, I was going back to see a childhood orthopedic surgeon. And so when I went back, he did refer me to a physiotherapist that he thought was sort of the best option there. This physiotherapist had been training for almost 30 to 40 years. And I went and saw him, but I was actually one of 2 patients that he had ever seen in his entire practice who had scoliosis, let alone a spinal fusion. So I started doing some physiotherapy work with him, but I would say it was sort of the Band-Aid approach. It was just, okay, do these things to try and relieve some of the pain, but then go back to your life, try and relieve the pain, go back to your life, try and relieve the pain. And it certainly wasn't something that was going to be able to build on itself. Eventually, after 2 years of sort of performing in this band and traveling and touring, almost a good thing, but the band sort of broke up and split ways. I was sort of dealing with more and more pain, more and more fatigue. Even a lot of my bandmates were concerned with me because I'm sort of lying in bed, trying to build up the energy to go either play a show or go into a rehearsal. And they just thought, hey, this isn't normal. Someone shouldn't be lying down this much at your age, at a young age of, 26, 27. Eventually the band split ways. I did end up moving home, and naively I thought, okay, I'm going to take 6 months. I'm going to live sort of with my parents, with my family again, now that I've moved back into the country. And I'll sort of address this in 6 months and sort of fix it and then go back to being a musician again. I did see the same physiotherapist that I'd been working with at that point on and off for about 2 years, one session here, one session there. And he suggested that I go see some other more specialized physiotherapist. He just thought, hey, because I don't have any experience with fusions or with people with scoliosis, I think you're better off in someone else's hands. And I do sort of respect him for that. But I ended up seeing about 4 or 5 other physiotherapists, several that said that they specialized in scoliosis, but again, had very little experience, had very little patients that actually either had fusions or had adult scoliosis. And so after going to see 4 or 5 different physiotherapists and sort of getting not really a lot of answers, or sort of being told again and again, hey, I think you should go see someone else that is, you know, better suited for you. I went back to the first physiotherapist that I started with, and I said, hey, listen, like, I think I just need to work with you. I've tried to see all these other specialists, so to speak, and they all just sort of don't know how to handle me and what to do. So I sort of made a pact with that physio that we're going to take this week by week, and he's going to sort of try his best to sort of address all of these different muscle imbalances and atrophy issues with various muscles and nerve problems. I did end up going to some psychology for 2 years, which at the time when I had moved home, I was off work. I could barely keep up with a normal day. I was carrying around a foam cushion and putting it behind me in pretty much every single social situation I could. I had to learn the word no a lot, which was sort of to turn down social events, turn down various things just because of that back pain. But then I started, and this was about 2018, so about 10 years after I had had the fusion surgery, I started sort of my recovery, which again, naively, I thought would be about 6 months, which ended up being about 5 to 6 years. I worked almost weekly, if not bi-weekly, with this physiotherapist, doing acupuncture sessions, dry needling sessions, doing a lot of manual therapy, creating a list, just a laundry list of various physiotherapy exercises. I did start getting into the pool and trying to do some basic swimming exercises, and I just took this religiously. Like I lived my scoliosis and I lived my recovery. It took a lot longer than I thought. As the years went by and by, it was actually almost fortunate to be going through the pandemic, because I think everyone had to stop everything. And so it seemed kind of normal for me to have to stop my entire life and just sort of take this as seriously as a full-time job. But over the next 4 or 5 years, I worked with that physiotherapist. I sort of worked up some muscle strength and just addressed each issue one at a time. It was a very sort of tedious and long process, but I'm sort of coming at the end of that 5 or 6 years. And as much as I still go through a lot of fatigue and a lot of pain, I'm certainly not in the same place where I was. Diet has been a huge sort of help for me in the last year. Again, it was something that was never sort of brought up as a solution to chronic pain. The only thing that was sort of suggested was just various medications, nerve medications, pain medications, antidepressants. And it wasn't that I was opposed to these medications, but I did have a few pain doctors that said, hey, listen, that's a lifelong medication, and it's not going to create muscles in your back. It's not going to create sort of healthy nerves. And so I did find diet, as well as a lot of other just different protocols that I still sort of keep to this day. I mean, I do an hour physiotherapy routine every single night before bed. I still sort of carry that cushion around in social situations. I still have to learn to explain this to a lot of people. There's something that's called the spoon theory, which is, if anyone isn't familiar with it, I recommend just Googling the spoon theory. And essentially, it's just learning that when you have a spinal fusion, that fatigue is going to be more common, that you're going to be running on a little bit smaller of a gas tank, so to speak, for the day. And so you need to sort of be mindful of that and measure that. But things have gotten a lot better thanks to also Martha's group, learning a lot through the TOPS Foundation. And yeah, so if anything I can say, if you're going through a difficult time right now, continue to just communicate with people the best that you can. It can be really hard to sort of bring this up to family members and friends and things and sort of address this in the severity that it really is, but that there is hope out there. Just keep looking for solutions for yourself. Keep looking for either other people who have dealt with it through online communities and forums like this. But just keep looking for answers and solutions. Everyone's fusion is different. Everyone's back is different. Everyone's lifestyle is different. But there are answers out there. So don't give up hope on your situation.
Thanks for sharing that. And you're drumming again, right? You're back
Yes, I
to
am.
drumming and teaching, and you're able to do it fully.
Yeah, so 5 years ago, I couldn't, I was playing my instrument for 2 or 3 hours at a time, and I couldn't play for more than 10 or 15 minutes. And that was really defeating, but I sort of worked my way back into it. And so now I am drumming again. Yeah. And so it's one of those things I make the joke that drummers don't have a lot of back support. We just sort of sit on one little throne. But luckily, there are sort of assisted like back thrones that have some back support on it. So I have a lot more back support than I used to have. Yeah, and so things are
Yeah.
definitely better.
Hey, maybe that's a side gig for you, developing different stools for drummers anyway. Yeah. Nice. Great to hear your story. Thanks so much for sharing. Yeah. So, yeah. Any questions for Matt? Just, yeah, good. Write them down and we'll get to them after. Always so interesting to hear what we go through. So, yeah. So Meg, we have Meg, yeah, from Florida. Let's get Meg unmuted and come on in, Meg. And yeah, let's, you're unmuted. Great. And yeah, thanks for being here. Thanks for being willing to share.
Thank you, Martha, and thanks for having me today. I'm honored to be a part of this inaugural Fusion Forum here. My name is Meg. I live in North Florida with my husband and our 2 cats. I am 59 years old, and I've had a fused spine for 45 years. When I was 12 years old, I remember missing a day of 6th grade, and that was the day they did the Adams Forward Bend test, and they screened everybody in my class except me for scoliosis. But luckily, as I have cats, I've always loved cats, and I had some stray cat that I was petting, and it must have scratched me at some point. So the next year, I developed this lump under my right armpit, and in the process of getting an x-ray to find out what it was, they discovered that I had a right thoracic, left lumbar scoliosis. After this diagnosis, the lump turned out to be cat scratch fever, and then it just mysteriously disappeared, just like it had come. So I was referred to an orthopedic surgeon in Atlanta, and I had another x-ray, and it showed that the curve was progressing rapidly, and I had an idiopathic double major scoliosis. My thoracic curve was 44 degrees. My lumbar curve was 34. So it was too late for bracing. The only option was to have a spinal fusion to perhaps correct the curve and keep it from getting worse. So I was right at the border I was 44 degrees. So the surgeon said, just go straight to spinal fusion. So that's what we did. In 1979, my spinal fusion was performed with 1 Harrington rod with 2 hooks on the either end, and it was reinforced by a paste of pulverized bone chips that were taken from my hip. My spine was fused from T2 to L2. A few days after the surgery, I felt something pop in between my shoulder blades, and I know I said something to my dad, but I can't remember if I told anybody else. But anyway, nothing happened. Excuse me. I was sounding the alarm, wasn't being heard. Right before they discharged me, they did another x-ray, and it revealed that the pop was the T2 hook that had come undone. So I had a second surgery to fix it. So I wound up spending more time in the hospital than I want to say I was there for a month. So I went home with a plaster cast that went over my shoulders and to my hips, and it had a hole cut out. And it was I remember being very hard to breathe, but I had to wear that thing. I couldn't take it off. I had to wear it for 9 months in the summer in Florida, and that was miserable. My post-surgery instructions consisted of no riding horses, no riding motorcycles, and no jumping on a trampoline. And barring these activities, I was cleared to do pretty much anything I wanted to after 1 year post-fusion. So returning to the 8th grade was a very isolating experience for me. I had only been at this school for a couple of months, and I didn't have, before the surgery, I didn't have many friends. All the women that I've reconnected with now remember the day that I came back in a body cast. So I'm still, as an adult now, I'm still unpacking how all this affected me emotionally, because I received absolutely no mental health counseling and no physical therapy at all. no support whatsoever, and my only refuge was in music. So in 1982, I was 17 years old and I was released from surgical follow-up forever. I was still excused from PE for the whole rest of high school. The surgeon I think he did an excellent job on my spinal fusion. And so far I haven't had any problems with that, the hardware. And I just want to say that I'm grateful for the surgery. Later that year, a friend recruited me to join a gym with her. So I started lifting weights and reading Shape magazine. And that was the beginning of my interest in fitness and nutrition. And 10 years later, at age 27, in the early 90s, I started getting a monthly massage. So weightlifting and massage kept my younger body strong and pain-free overall. I never really had any back pain to speak of. And I never let my spinal fusion hold me back from doing anything that I wanted to do. And I lived a full life. And in fact, I kind of forgot that I even had a fusion. So I was 35 years old and I made my way to Tucson, Arizona. And I began taking yoga classes and experimenting with different yoga forms. And I also joined a gym with a pool, and I started doing aqua aerobics classes. And I was the only 30-something in a class in the pool with the ladies who are my age now. I took voice lessons too, and I learned diaphragmatic breathing. And I was a singer in a couple of Irish music bands. And then when those bands broke up, as bands do, I joined a world music band as a singer that featured an instrument that I had fallen in love with, the didgeridoo. So that was the beginning of my interest in sound therapy. So all the while, I was still getting massage, and I loved it so much that I enrolled in a 1,000-hour massage therapy program at the school in Tucson to learn how to be a therapist myself. And this experience transformed me. I took anatomy and physiology. I learned about the importance of body mechanics while performing a massage and just in regular everyday life. And I was forced to get over the shame and the embarrassment that I felt over my scar during the first week of classes, because I had to get undressed and get under a sheet 3 times a day, 5 days a week for my classmates. So that I got over that real quick. So it was called the Desert Institute of Healing Arts at the time. The school has been sold, and it's still there, but it has a different name. But anyway, so we spent an entire day dedicated to learning about scoliosis. We learned about convexities and concavities, muscle imbalances, techniques to help relieve these muscle imbalances. And we also learned that fatigue is a symptom of scoliosis because muscles are constantly fighting to hold an asymmetrical body upright in gravity, and they have to work extra hard, and this can be fatiguing. And that was like a light bulb moment for me, because I did feel fatigue, but I just thought I was lazy. So that's what I thought. So I've given myself permission over time to learn how to rest. So during this time, I still didn't experience back pain, but shortly after I started massage school, I started having problems with my right sacroiliac joint, and that would plague me throughout my entire career as a massage therapist. After graduation, I began working at a massage clinic, and I was always so thrilled when I would get a client with scoliosis because, of course, I learned, I threw everything into what I learned in school and my own experience into helping them feel better in their bodies. So Tucson is the home to Canyon Ranch and Miraval, and it's also the home to the Andrew Weil Center for Integrative Medicine at the University of Arizona. So it was bursting with opportunities for me to explore alternative healing modalities. And these generally fell into a category of hands-on body work, like structural integration. I started getting chiropractic, craniosacral therapy, and then water-based therapies like Watsu, which is a shiatsu in a pool, energy work like Reiki, and meditation and mind-body techniques. So fast forward to 2005, I'm 40 years old. I moved back to Florida where my mom and sister still lived, and it was getting harder to do massages. So I worked for about 7 years as a therapist and a massage therapist, and I just eventually got burned out, and I found that office job. They allowed me to use my college degree, and as soon as I quit doing massage, my SI joint pain disappeared. So I felt 10 years younger. I elected to not do any more continuing education, just kind of let my license expire. And I would spend the next 15 years in an office chair staring at a computer screen, and I immediately put on 10 pounds. When I was 41 years old, I met my husband. I very matter-of-factly told him about my back surgery and my scar. And sometimes I didn't know how a guy would react. And my husband says, "Wow, you went through all that as a teenager. You're awesome." So he went from he's a former football player, but he's my biggest cheerleader now. He's been texting me all day. "You're going to do great." So middle age definitely upped the ante for my body. But instead of stepping up my self-care, a cascade of stressful events happened in chaos. And I also had a femur break during this time. So it was hard to maintain any kind of, I just worked all day at a really stressful office job, and then I dealt with chaos and stuff at home. It was hard to maintain any kind of regular workout schedule. And I even stopped getting massages for a while. And having fallen out of my fitness routine, wine was the quickest route to pain relief. And I started to put on even more weight, which I'm still trying to take off now. So after turning 50, I began. So this is when I had been okay up until the SI joint pain was one thing, but I had been okay until I turned 50. And I want to stress that. After turning 50, I began to notice low back pain after standing, walking, or sitting for a long period of time. And I couldn't use my standing desk at the office for more than 10 minutes. Now, was this due to my fusion, or was it just because I was now a middle-aged woman? My doctor referred me to pain management, and I had to do physical therapy before I could get an MRI. And I remember one of the physical therapists telling me to do back bend. I'm like, "I can't. We'll just try." I'm like, I literally cannot bend my back. But anyway, did physical therapy. I got the MRI, and I got a prescription for narcotic pain meds and anti-inflammatory muscle relaxers and later nerve meds. And I just want to stress also that I'm not opposed to medication, but I certainly cannot function on a narcotic all day. So all this time, my husband had been watching my pain get worse. And by the time I was 55, we agreed that the office job was just accelerating my decline. And I retired, and he said, "Okay, I want you to just spend all your time focusing on your body now." So not being chained to a desk for 8 hours, I immediately began to feel better. And then 2 months in, and this was like December of 2019 when I resigned. So 2 months into figuring out my new life, COVID hit, and I stopped going to the gym, and my home workouts were sporadic. So just like everybody else, I took a big dive during COVID. And we also we watched TV, we watched HBO, and, just hung out and. So in 2021, I really knew that I needed to do something, and I still wasn't going back to the gym. I saw an orthopedic surgeon, and he advised me to get strong if I wanted to avoid for future back surgery. So I was still working out at home, and I was trying to come up with ideas, and I started connecting with some of the spinal fusion movement educators that I met on Instagram, and I met Martha at Twisted Outreach. I started doing some of her somatics classes, and I joined the support group. And for the first time, I met other people with spinal fusions just like me. And it was really comforting to know that some of the things that I had figured out, they had also figured out. The challenges that I had, they had the same challenges. So I started working out. Everything I did was online, and I just kind of threw myself into just full tilt. Like, I had an online personal trainer for scoliosis. I did an online Pilates class with the trainer with the spinal fusion, and I did Kaya spinal fusion, yoga for spinal fusion. So I just went on, and then I learned about shock therapy, and I started doing that. So that was, all this stuff was a game changer, and I clawed my way out of the abyss of chronic pain. So I got stronger, and I had never been to Europe, and I decided that I better start doing this stuff. So I went on my first solo female adventure to Europe, and it was very empowering, although I was exhausted from standing in line and walking around all day and on concrete floors in museums. But I did it anyway, and I took 4 trips that year, one of which was a retreat with Martha in Vancouver area. But I think my Mount Everest was I made it to the top of, walked up to St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, and that was like as Mount Everest as it's ever going to get for me. Last year, I solo traveled for 3 months through France and the UK, and I had 2 suitcases with bags on top, and a backpack, a yoga mat, and a shopping trolley, and I schlepped all of it by myself on trains, on a ferry. Yeah. So we know that one of those bags contained all my travel pain management props. But I noticed after a few days in Paris, my usual pain was just not there. I learned that I didn't need as much stuff as I thought. And I did have pain, but I didn't let it stop me from anything that I wanted to do. And it was also eye-opening. After about a week on the French food supply without all the additives that we have, I couldn't believe how much better I felt. So diet is, like Matt said, is definitely a part of pain management that I need to improve on. So through experimentation, I found that if I take a multifaceted approach to not pain management, but living with a spinal fusion and pain management, I have more good days than bad. And I learned that I absolutely must keep my core strong to support my spine. I learned, like Stacy said, I learned to prioritize sleep. And I have cut way back on my wine consumption, and I feel so much better when I'm not drinking. I also try to eat an anti-inflammatory diet. And then last year, I answered the siren song of the Pilates reformer. I was fascinated with this piece of equipment and I wanted to use it. So I've been doing reformer Pilates as my primary thing, and then also weight training. But reformer Pilates 2 to 3 times a week for about 1 year, pretty steadily. I haven't really done too many trips this year. So more often than not, I roll out of bed with no back pain. And my fusion has forced me to take care of myself from a young age. And when something prevents me from doing that, I've had to learn a few times over that pain follows. So if I take care of myself, I'm going to be okay. And if I don't take care of myself, I'm going to be in pain. So right now, my hands-on treatments are massage, craniosacral therapy, Schroff PT that I have to go to somebody's office for, and mental health counseling. I love to do flotation therapy when I feel the need, and especially when I'm traveling. I try to attend the support group meetings, and I've recently been going to a sound bath and breathwork sessions, and I'm getting more into sound therapy. So I know that sounds like a lot of activities, but remember, I'm retired and I have the time to experiment with different things, and it's fun for me, but I do have to balance my activities with other financial priorities, and that's something that I'm always adjusting. So now I've kind of come, time is a flat circle, and I've once again become, I've got a diagnosis in something that ends in osis, and that is osteoporosis. So before I jump into anything, I am trying to educate myself about this condition so that I can make the best decision about treatment options. Now, there are some lifestyle changes that I need to make to support my bone health, but this time around, I know I'm not the only one out there facing this challenge. And I absolutely refuse to live in fear. So all the things I've related are my personal lived experience and should not be considered medical advice. And just remember, I'm decades away from my surgery. What works for me might not resonate with you at this time, but maybe later, who knows? There are so many resources for people with spinal fusions now that when I was a younger person, and when I think about what I didn't have, it makes me sad for my younger self. So that's kind of where I'm at now. I guess my advice to people would be that what I found is that taking care of your body with a spinal fusion is definitely a part-time job. And as you get older, you need to step up your efforts. When I was younger, it was fine just to, work out and do general stuff and go to the gym and get a massage. But now I need to be more targeted and focused. And that has helped me kind of live pain-free. So thank you for having me today and for listening.
Woohoo! Thank you, Meg. I'm inspired by how many things you have been willing to try and explore, and also uncover what works for you, right? And that's where that part-time, even full-time job comes in. So it's inspiring to to hear all of your stories about how, you find solutions for yourself, because we're the only ones who know how we feel, right? Okay, well, we do have a few questions here. So thank you so much, everybody, for your participation. So there was a question from Matt that you touched on it a little bit regarding the male experience. And the question is, did you find being a male that the experience was extra isolating?
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely answer that. If people aren't familiar, scoliosis is about, I think it's, some people say it's 8 to 1, some people say it's 9 to 1, female over male. So for every one male that has scoliosis, it'll be about 8 to 9 females. So it is something that's a little bit you don't find as many sort of men going through the same experience. And I found that initially when I was going through a lot of chronic pain, it was pretty hard to find someone that looked like me or that might have been going through a similar sort of experience or had a similar story. There's sort of the expression, suck it up and be a man, which is something that unfortunately I experienced a lot, trying to explain to sort of like coworkers or to friends and things like that. Unfortunately, back pain is just something that people have experienced on their own. It's normally some sort of lower back, sciatic back pain, either by, doing some sort of exercise wrong, picking up something too quickly that was too heavy. And so a lot of the times when I would sort of mention like, oh man, my back's not feeling so great today. You feel that sort of comparison constantly happening. Like, oh yeah, I remember a couple weeks ago. Yeah, like I was really having a hard time getting through the day. And so, it kind of just fell on deaf ears a lot. Unfortunately, it's just sort of this thing where men are just expected to carry a heavier physical load sometimes, just carrying things and sort of if there's 2 men and 2 women and there's a bunch of heavy things, unfortunately the men sort of are expected to sort of carry a lot of those things. And so when I was trying to sound the alarm at the alarm bells of like going through a lot of chronic pain with a lot of different jobs, it was just sort of this suck it up. You're looking for attention. You're exaggerating it more than it really is. Even sort of the sentiment of maybe it's in your head. Maybe you sort of have like a psychological problem here. And so unfortunately, you just had to sort of push through it and push through and push through. And it was really hard to relate with people on that side of things.
Yeah, I could totally see that happening. Yeah. And I mean, I think that's the same for all of us, not just men, to not be understood. And it's up to us to keep on explaining it, come up with our, what I call elevator pitch. So you can get the help you need without having to get too dramatic. Yeah. Good question though. Thanks, Danielle. Gail. Yay, Gail. I'm not sure where you are, but nice you're here. Question for Matt or for anyone. What is the relationship between low energy and scoliosis? Oh, and actually, Meg did address that, the idea that just the muscle imbalances take up that much more energy day to day. But I might add myself, the instrumentation can cause people a lot of trouble. There can be low-grade infections that you're not even aware of for years that are in there, and they cause chronic issues that take forever to even figure out. I know that a few people can speak to that who's on this call. So also, I believe that the idea of just holding ourselves up against the curves and also against the limitation of the rods. I mean, they're there to hold us up, but they also hold us back from being able to really stretch, right? So there's certain kind of circulation issues that can be really debilitating, I believe. I don't know if Stacy or anyone else has a thought about the relationship between low energy and scoliosis.
I'd love to answer that too, but
Stacy?
I was just going to add, thinking of the nervous system, some of us with scoliosis have a hard time with balance because our body's trying to keep us centered, keep us upright. And so our body's just working overtime all the time. And I think back to high school from hearing some of the other presenters. I think back even in high school, I would prioritize my sleep then. And I'm wondering, like, is it because of my scoliosis or is it my habit? But I feel like I need to sleep more than my peers did, like growing up. So I think that our nervous system is like working on overdrive as well, and that's just very tiring.
I would agree. Matt?
Yeah, I think, and Meg touched on this too. There's a big emotional and psychological component that goes along with it that oftentimes it's not sort of addressed, which is, when you are more often than not going to have a lot of chronic fatigue symptoms, just because again, your muscles and your nervous system is working a lot harder to sort of get through an average day. And so I think the psychological component that gets attached to that is just I'm lazy, and that does kind of tie into the male experience a little bit there too, but. It was just one of the things where noticing how tired I was and then trying to address that I was tired to other people, again, just sort of fell on deaf ears of, yeah, I'm tired too, but we all got to get through it kind of thing. But the spoon theory, again, if you don't mind just me sharing a little bit about that, that was introduced to me by someone at the mental health facility in my city. And it was something that's becoming more and more common. It has been around for a long time, but it's even something that some of the medical facilities are starting to introduce as sort of advice to people with whether or not it's autoimmune conditions or chronic fatigue issues. But the spoon theory is essentially a story. Please, go ahead and Google it. You should be able to find it pretty easily. But someone who had lupus was going with her best friend to a diner, and they were sitting together. And her best friend asked the woman with lupus, "So, what is it like having lupus? Like, how do you experience that, and what does that look like day to day?" And so she grabbed a whole bunch of spoons that were on the diner table and put them together. And she had 10 spoons laid out. And she said to her best friend, here's you on a day. You have 10 spoons. And so everything takes a few spoons or one spoon. So you get up, you get ready for work. We've taken one spoon away. So you're left with 9. You go to work, you work from morning until noon. We're going to take 2 spoons away from you. You're going to have lunch. You're going to work the rest of the day, maybe from 1 until 5. And then we're going to take 3 spoons away. So now we've got, out of the 10 spoons, we've already taken away 6 of those spoons. So you've come home, now you're going to cook dinner. Maybe you're going to take one more spoon out of the 4 left. But you have 3 spoons left for the rest of your night. So whether or not you want to go to the gym, that'll take about 2 of your last spoons, and then maybe 1 more just to do some cleanup at night. Maybe you want to go be social, that'll take those 2 spoons. But essentially you go to sleep, you wake up the next day, and you're refreshed with another 10 spoons. And she said to her best friend, "Here's me." And she took 3 of those spoons away and only had 7. And she said, "I wake up with 7 spoons every day. And I go through the same day that you go through. So I wake up, I get ready, I take 1 spoon away, now I have 6. I go to work the same work day as you, and I work from 9 to noon. I take away 3 of those spoons. Now I only have about 3 or 4 spoons left. I get through the rest of my work day. I've taken the other 3 spoons for the rest of the workday. And now when you come home with 4 spoons at the end of a workday, I come home with 1 spoon left. So I have to make the decision, am I going to cook dinner and rest for the rest of the night? Am I going to have to order dinner? I can't go be social tonight. I certainly can't have enough energy to go to the gym. And that's just a really startling sort of realization for a lot of people that we might be dealing with a lot more fatigue and a lot more, less energy, less spoons. So it was something that I even had to educate family members and even coworkers and things like that. Hey, I don't think I have enough spoons today. And it was something that got across really, really in a nice sort of elegant kind of way. Like, oh, okay, right, that makes sense to me now. So chronic fatigue, I think, is something that we all sort of deal with for sure.
Great story. Yeah, that's a great way. Good image. Yeah, thank you. Okay, a few more questions here to get through. And Matt, again, do you want to talk a bit more about the dietary effects? And Meg, too, you mentioned that you have found benefit from the anti-inflammatory diet. And so maybe just say a few words about that, how the dietary effects made a difference for you, either Matt or Meg.
So if you don't mind, Meg, it was about a year or so ago. Actually, when I went through sort of what I would call my rock bottom, sort of my rehab, where everything sort of caught up with me and I was really sort of at a bottom point for me. I started to develop psoriasis on both of my hands, more on my right hand than my left. I did have a small patch of psoriasis that was on my elbow and also on my back. And that was something that I had never experienced in my entire life. As a child, I had little bits of eczema, never anything serious. And so this psoriasis sort of just showed up. And then after a few years of sort of kind of going through sort of my rehab approach and seeing physiotherapies and things, I started to have a lot of thyroid issues. So one thing led to another after seeing lots of different dermatologists and thyroid specialists. I was about to go on sort of lifelong medications for thyroid condition and for psoriasis, which just meant usually a topical sort of steroid cream. And sort of naively, I sort of put two and two together and I thought, well, these seem like inflammatory problems. And it seems like because of the fusion that I have, that I must have a lot more inflammation than the average person does. So I just looked into an anti-inflammatory diet, which was something I Googled. I had heard of people doing sort of these sort of more radical diets, and I was just in so much chronic pain all the time that I just thought, hey, I've got nothing to lose here. I'll try it for 4 to 6 weeks. If it helps, that's great. If it doesn't help, then at least I know I've tried it. So I started on an anti-inflammatory diet, which seemed to be something like a ketogenic diet, which was just a low carbohydrate diet. I started doing that for 2 months, 2 or 3 months, and it was radical. The pain relief, the energy that I started to have. It was something where I would go into an activity, sort of being mindful about where my body was at, and how much energy I thought I was going to be able to put into that activity. And I think it's something that we all get used to sort of measuring, not to go overboard. And I remember thinking, wow, I can get through a lot more today than I was a year ago or 2 years ago. And it's not like I changed anything about an exercise routine or anything. And so I just thought, wow, is this diet really this silver bullet that it feels like it is? So I've stuck to it for a little over a year now. Every time I tried to deviate back to a more just anything goes kind of diet, pain symptoms went back up, fatigue went back up, and the psoriasis ended up getting a lot worse. Stacy and I have actually shared with each other things about the lion diet, but essentially, diet has been a huge part in relieving a lot of those thyroid symptoms. It turns out my thyroid levels went back up to normal, my psoriasis got better, and my energy level and pain level just were so much better. So yeah, if it's something anyone's considering, it is a lot of discipline. It's pretty hard socially. You do have to learn how to communicate to people. When you're out at a restaurant or when you're out in public and things like that, not to sort of turn people down when they're trying to give you sweets or cookies or things like that. You can get away with a little bit of leeway here or there, but yeah, it's something I suggest anyone kind of looks into.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks. And Meg, did you have another thought about that?
No, I think Matt covered everything. Thank you, Matt.
Awesome. Great. Yeah. And of course, we're so lucky with the internet now. We really can look into so many things and learn for things for ourselves. But then doing it's another story. Yeah. Okay. So then there's a few questions here. Meg, something about moving from your physical job to the office job. The self-care was the key for you, and failing that caused biggest issues. So do you have any recommendations for someone else who is now in an office job with a fusion and maybe not as physical as before? And I mean, healthcare, sure. Self-care, basically says, I hear that self-care was key for you. What other recommendations do you have for someone in that position? Maybe on the job? Mm-hmm.
Sit on a cushion, like a cushion lab that suspends your coccyx. I can show you. I would have to get up and go show, but I have a coccyx.
We can do some links in the afterwards. Yeah,
like a super comfortable cushion helps getting up and moving around as much as you can. And trying to make sure that your hip flexors are stretched really well, your psoas muscles, your hip flexors, stretching your hip flexors and working on your glutes. And I'm not a personal trainer, but I know that I think I read something about gluteal amnesia recently. So when we sit for so long, our glutes atrophy. Walking you were allowed 2 15-minute breaks. And also, if you can, this helped me a lot, is to lie down. I had an office, so I was able to close my door. And if I didn't want to walk, I would just lie down for 15 minutes or do some kind of, moving around, some yoga. So that getting a standing desk if you can. Yeah. But I would say, like, if you have any way to have some control over your working conditions, that would be the best. And that, yeah, control over your working conditions if you can.
And while we've got you, Meg, there's also any considerations and advice for seeking out professional massage therapy for the first time, the styles of massage, for example?
You know, I have been thinking about doing a series on my Instagram channel about massage, because I'm hearing, this is the second time I've heard about a massage therapist doing a stretch. So I'm going to say that massage therapy has benefited me a lot. And the biggest thing I can say is make sure that you have a conversation with the therapist before you get on the table. This can take the form of, now I had my clients fill out an intake form, and some people have you fill out HIPAA forms. So that's a point where you can discuss your medical issues, and they're not going to touch your bones, but you just want to make sure that they know about your fusion. If that doesn't happen and you don't fill out an intake form, and you should be having a conversation, the therapist should be asking you what's going on with your body. That's when you tell them. And if nothing like that takes place, then you initiate the conversation. So don't get on a table without explaining your fusion to the therapist. And there were at least 28 people in my class who have worked on a spinal fusion. They're out there somewhere. Also, speak up if you're uncomfortable and give them feedback. They actually want you to do that. They want to know if the pressure's too much or not enough. They want to know if you're cold. So feel empowered to speak up. That's my best advice. And look for, if you've never gotten a massage before, you can't go wrong with just a regular spa massage, just a relaxation massage to get used to the concept of getting on a massage table.
Awesome. Yeah, excellent advice. Yeah, there are so many different kinds of massage.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, my advice often is find a person you connect with, a place that's easy for you to get to, a place where you feel listened to. And if at any time you have had a bad massage or you felt uncomfortable in that situation, then just do not be going back there, right? Like,
don't go back.
Move on. There's always another person to try. And you really, it's a vulnerable situation. You want to be as comfortable as you can in that situation. Yeah. Good question, Jessica. Yeah. And here we have a question for Stacy. What helped you most with your childbirth to have a natural birth? And did you have any troubles relaxing your back in labor?
I think what helped me the most was being active throughout my pregnancy. If I had been in an office job all those months leading up to the birth of my son, I don't think I would have had the same outcome. So, for me, it was just lots of like practicing yoga and walking and mindset. It's kind of comical. You never know when you're having your first child what to even expect. It's pretty overwhelming. But I thought I had a birthing tub ready. I was going to do it all. I had my playlist ready. I had my music. I had my birthing tub, and it ended up that it was just so quick. And actually, like, the doctor had gone home for the night and the tub was never set up, and I didn't use all those things. But it was intense pain, but it doesn't compare at all to what I remember from having my surgery. So I know that some people don't have it so well, and labor could be more than a day. So that was not my situation, though. But I think it was really all those months like leading up to it and just moving every single day.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And like anything, every situation is so unique, but more awareness is more awareness, right? More mindfulness around all that preparation, even if you didn't use it all, I'm sure it led to your mindset being in the right place.
Yeah.
Okay, we're getting to the end of our time here, but there's quite a few. There's a comment here about the idea that overall knowledge about chronic pain has jumped really significantly in the last few years in particular, and it's been really helpful for getting the language to talk about it with others. And that's, a really good point, Karen, that learning to talk about your pain and what words to use, and so that it isn't just dismissed like everyone else's pain, to understand that pain's in the brain, that you can only cover up pain for so long. You need to actually get into it to unwind it. There's psychological aspects to it. There's neurological aspects. It's more than just pain, right? And often moving the area that's uncomfortable is what will stimulate the healing, right? So often it feels like when we're going through something new, it can get worse before it gets better, but it's part of the process. And understanding the different kinds of pain that you go through is going to help you understand that you're actually healing when you are healing. So that's a good one to remember. Now there's somebody sent us they Googled the spoon theory, so that's easily found. And then Suzanne has asked us some wonderful questions, which are really quite big questions, Suzanne. I'll read out all three, and maybe in these last couple of minutes, if anyone wants to chime in. Now, this is Suzanne. She hasn't had the surgery, but how many of you had spinal fusion with more than 8 to 10 segments? Is there anyone here who has more than 8 to 10 segments? Yeah, me too. I'm like nine segments. Yeah, there's a few hands going up. Knowing your curve pattern, knowing your fusion pattern, how many vertebrae are fused is a good idea to know. Yeah, who's going to tell us if we don't go searching for it in the old files at the hospital? And then asking, how long did it take before the pain subsided after surgery? Weeks, months? Are you still experiencing pain? She's mentioning that she hasn't had the surgery yet. She'll have one next year. It'll be 13 levels, T5 down to the tailbone, and that she's been reading it can be a year all the way up to 2 years before one can feel normal without being in constant pain. So all of these are amazing comments and questions. The trick is that it's a different answer for every single person. And the amount of pain people go through, how long it takes to recover. There's just so many things that are part of that, I guess, reality. Like, I don't know, does someone else want to just comment on that? Like, how long we talked a little bit about earlier, but you get out of the hospital, it doesn't mean you're recovered. It doesn't mean your energy is back. Taking a year or two, it could be very normal at this point to get your energy back. Absolutely. So anyone else want to comment on that?
I just want to make a comment. So, I mean, my surgery I was a teenager. A teenager is going to bounce back completely differently than somebody who's in their 50s. I'm sorry, Suzanne, I'm not sure how old you said that you were, maybe 59. So I can't speak on that, but one thing I remember is when I left the hospital, so this was 1994, times have changed. I don't know what it's like nowadays and what they give you, but they gave me so few pain medicines, or like Percocet, I think it was, because of the risk of somebody becoming dependent upon it. And I remember getting home and with my mom, like counting out the pills and deciding like, how am I going to spread these out? Because it was not enough, but that was all that I had. Whereas like nowadays, I feel like they're more generous. But a couple years after my fusion, I had an employer and she wanted me to speak to her friend who is an adult, probably in her 30s, had a couple kids, and she had the spinal fusion and she was addicted to pain meds. And here I was like 18 or 19 years old. And this woman was like, can you talk to my friend? And so all I can say is that this woman was not moving and sitting and dependent upon meds. And I think that we're all smart and that we know this, but it's good to go into something with the mindset of, like you said, Martha, sometimes it gets worse before it gets better. Going to have to learn how to walk again after a surgery is really hard. But the alternative is what? You take a pain med and you stay in bed. So I think as much as you can find these little therapies that might just be like a small relief, like that's just going to equip you so much better. So yeah, we can't really say. And I
can chime in about my broken femur that I didn't talk about, but when I was 46, I broke my left femur, and that break happened on October 11th, and I went back to work right before Thanksgiving because I'd used up all my leave, and I didn't walk again until February, March. What I remember about that time is that healing took longer than I thought. It takes a lot of energy to heal. And I had a physical therapist, and she goes, don't worry about it. I said, I'm going to go back to the gym. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Just go live your life, and don't even just live your life. Well, she was right, because when I came home from work, I was so tired. All I could do was just collapse on the couch. So it's probably going to take For an older person, I would say the more rest you get and the kinder you are to yourself, you'll heal faster. And don't try to overdo it. Let it take its natural course.
Yeah, and that's where some of the pressures that say got mentioned with Stacy was saying, or I mean, Matt was saying, like there's pressure, like for us, we feel the pressure to keep up with everyone. We just want to be like everybody else and keep up with them, but that's not always realistic, right? We often need to just really go inside ourselves. We have to learn to feel ourselves and sense ourselves. And I think that often, especially when we've had the surgery young, we stop feeling ourselves. We don't want to feel it. We don't want to feel that discomfort. So learning even to go in there and sense it and listen to it and do something good for yourself and not feel the peer pressure of trying to keep up is a big one. And, there are these other questions we're kind of at time now. There's these questions of using a recliner instead of a bed. Some people that works for, some people it doesn't. Having surgery post-menopause can be another story for people. And they are doing surgeries like that but you definitely want to be sure you have the right bone density. And I have heard from people who are given bone density meds before taking on a surgery older. And somebody else has pointed out here in a response is that, the surgeries are done differently now. And depending on where you are in the world and who's doing the surgery and what the hardware is and what the procedures are, they are changing at a rapid pace. There's still not a lot of preventative care and there's still not a lot of follow-up care. So regardless of what the actual procedure is, you still really need to learn for yourself what works for you. And it's definitely something that I highly recommend that you, anyone with further questions, join our next Fusion support group in January. And you can find those dates on the Twisted Outreach Project website. And then this is where you can really have more complex responses to any questions and queries, especially for someone who's considering having the surgery. So please join us. If you have questions further that you really want answered before the third week of January, because that's when the meeting is, then please feel free to email the Twisted Outreach Project and we will answer you as best we can to help support you if you're having the surgery before then. Someone else is saying that they did use a recliner for a while. It was very helpful. So there's that answer. I never used a recliner, but that is definitely, all those questions are really good questions. And it's really good that you're thinking ahead regarding what you might need for the surgery. Okay, so I am just one last quick question here. Thanks to everybody. Good to hear people have found so many things to help. Exactly. And yeah, exactly. That is exactly the point here, is that there are things to help. We can help each other. We can help ourselves. And thank you so much to Stacy, Matt, and Meg for sharing your stories today. Thanks everyone else for chiming in. We will send up a follow-up email to anybody who did chime in, so you'll know when the discussion is available for viewing on YouTube. And remember to sign up for our newsletter if you're not already signed up, twistedoutreachproject.com. And stay tuned for the next forum sometime, hopefully in the spring. And I look forward to being in touch, possibly seeing you in a class online, or join us we're going to have a fusion retreat next spring. You can find all that on the website. So any last comments from Meg, Matt, or Stacy?
I just want to say, Cindy, I'm really close to you in Gainesville. So if you ever want to have a meetup, Martha has my email, or you might have it for a different, but I'm like super close to you on a big lake. So yeah.
Oh, that's super. I'd love to do that, Meg.
Okay.
Okay, I'll get it from Martha.
Okay, and I come down. I live in Tallahassee, but I'm down here close. I'm close to Gainesville right now, but close to Melrose. So
I'm in Hawthorne.
We're neighbors.
I know.
For sure. Let's get each other. Okay, let's get each other's email and we'll connect in real life.
Okay. See ya.
Another example of why it's important to have these meetings so we can meet each other. So take care, everybody. Happy holidays to everybody. And thanks again for everybody to join in.
Thank you, Martha.
Thank you, Martha.
Take care, everybody. Have a great day. Have a great evening wherever you are.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye for now.